ourselves. It's been a short while since we've been together, but first of all, if I could, I'd like to have a motion to adopt the agenda that you should have received. If you just put a hand up, and I'll do this very easily.
Your worship, if we could amend the agenda as well to add the.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes.
Thank you.
So it's an amended agenda, and I'm just holding up the PowerPoint presentation that I'll work a portion of the slides and then turn it over to Chris Bone. Okay, I'll pick somebody. Owen, Paul, any opposed? Carried. And the minutes that you should have received as well from the February 26th meeting, if I could get a mover and a seconder, please. Thank you, John. Lynn, all those opposed? That's carried. Thanks very much, everyone. What I would like to do is just do a round table. So if I can start, which is really up in my top left when I'm looking at the screen, that's Owen, and then yeah, go ahead, Owen.
Hi, Owen Foley, Natsios, Petula Burney, Birchmore, and President for Downtown Prince George. Nice to see you all again.
Thank you. And then just over to Walter.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Walter Babich, the acting city manager. Nice to see you all again as well.
David's iPad, I think that's Daniel, is it?
No, it's David McMullen here.
Hi, David.
I'm a member of the general public and a member of PG Fire as well.
Yeah. You look like Daniel for a minute. Thanks very much. Paul, over to you.
Yeah, no problem.
Hi, everyone. It's Paul Burry, the Library Director at the Prince George Public Library. Great to see everyone again.
Thank you. Shelby.
Hi, everyone. Shelby Peterson, average citizen.
And Lynn, did you say average person, Shelby?
Average citizen.
Oh, average citizen, above average.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think you're a bit more than average. But anyway, hi, I'm Lynn Brown. I'm also an average citizen, extra average, and I'm glad to be here today.
Thank you. Superintendent.
Superintendent Sean Wright, so officer in charge of the RCMP here in Prince George. So hello to everyone.
Daniel's iPad.
Hi, everyone. Dan Dennis. I represent the Gateway BIA.
And John. Charlotte.
Hi, everybody. I'm Charlotte Peters, and I'm the manager of bylaws for the city of Prince George.
Graham.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Graham Hall. I'm a manager with specialized community mental health and substance use programs here in Prince George. I work in Northern Health.
Todd. Todd, I think, yeah, you're muted. Okay, I'll go. Todd Corrigal is here. Over to Colleen and Valerie.
Good afternoon. This is Colleen Van Mook observing from downtown Prince George.
Thanks, Colleen. Valerie.
Valerie Hare from BC Housing, filling in for Malachy today.
Good to see you, Valerie. Thanks very much. Daniel.
Hi, this is Danielle from AWAC.
Oh, hi, Danielle.
I'm filling in for Connie.
Great, thanks very much. I have a 5626262 number.
Oh, that must be me. Yeah, that's Danielle.
Hi. Hi twice.
I guess so, maybe.
Okay, well, thanks very much, everybody. And I think the broader conversation today will come from the slide presentation that Chris and I will work through. I've got a couple other issues that I want to tap into as well as we move forward through this. And in the room here, we have Ian Wells, Chris Bone, and Maureen Conley. And Melissa is tucked away in the corner. So thanks very much. And I think, Chris, let's get started, or Maureen, if we could, and we'll just start with the presentation, and that'll create some discussion. So I want to make this, everybody, so free flowing. So as we move through this, if you have any questions or things that you want to bring up that triggers a thought within this presentation or afterwards, just give a shout. But I do want to eventually, and I'm sure there will be questions, get to Graham and to Valerie as well. And a couple of others, actually, Charlotte. Okay, ready to go. So one of the things that we had agreed on and had taken to council was those 4 bullet items that you see there: facilitate a coordinated advocacy process, advance of the BC Urban Mayor's Caucus, our 2020 blueprint for BC's urban future. And I think if I would just take a moment and briefly say that BC Urban Mayor's Caucus is, can you just go back for a minute? So I'm just going to touch on this quickly, Chris, there's 13 of us that represent the 13 largest communities in the province. And there's probably room for a couple more, but at this point it's 13 of us. The third bullet is lead the establishment of a downtown community safety hub, which we'll have Chris comment on. Evaluate and reprioritize the allocation of the safe, clean, and inclusive service enhancement package. Next slide, please. Thank you. So I'm just going to speak to the advocacy process, and I'll tie that in with the Chamber of Commerce, and I know they're doing work from a community recovery task force perspective, and I'll go to Todd in a minute just to comment on that. The BC Urban Mayor's Caucus, if I could, I'll just give a couple of minute update on that. We have been talking about our 4 pillars, and a lot of the conversation we're having is what's predominantly happening throughout every municipality in the province, and I'll refer to it as a downtown issue, but obviously it's more than that. It's a community issue when it comes to housing, and I know that's a broad range topic, but when it comes to housing, when it comes to services for opioid addiction, for mental illness, and that conversation is really happening around our table in conjunction with Minister Eby, Minister Robinson, Minister Osborne, Minister Malcolmson. So we have really touched into every ministry that would have a role to play in housing, including finance and health. So there's about 6 or 7 of those ministries that we continue to advocate with about the state of what we're seeing in increasing volume in the need to provide service from housing to healthcare within our homeless population. And I'll just mention that one of the ideas and one of the things that we've been talking about is around complex care. And that complex care issue, and there are some in the room that are more adept at being able to talk about complex care than I am, but plain and simply put, it's another level of care that we're seeing a huge necessity for on our streets. And so we've been working very closely with the province and those ministries that I've talked about to see how we can move that complex care issue forward. And of course, that involves funding, it involves particular locations, it involves just a massive amount of work, including BC Housing. So there'll be more to come on that, I'm hoping, within the next month or so. So if I could, before I go to the Strengthening Communities Program grant and ask Chris to give a comment, Todd, can you comment on the Chamber and I know the advocacy work that you're doing? Okay, may have lost Todd, so I'll come back to Todd. Chris, if I can just get you to talk about the Strengthening Communities Program grant.
Certainly, thank you, Your Worship. So we were advised in about, I think, early March that there was going to be some funding available through the Restart, and the funding would be available of about $100 million for local governments. That this funding program would be administered by the Union of BC municipalities, and that it was a program that was designed to support unsheltered homeless populations and address the community impacts. So the eligibility for applications was based on population. So the city of Prince George was eligible to apply for up to $2.5 million. As you can see by the submission deadline, April 16th, it was a very fast turnaround. We understand that the grant decisions will be communicated in July of this year. So I won't go through all of these other than to say that these were the intended outcomes of the community's Strengthening Communities Grant Program. And you can see there that it was very much tilted in favor of supports and services for the unsheltered homeless population residing in our community. Here is the proposed activity eligibility criteria. Once again, we were required to demonstrate evidence of community need, that really to focus on temporary solutions that addressed urgent and immediate needs. The good news was that it allowed us to not only include new activities, but also to expand existing activities with costs that had been incurred as far back as September of 2020. We also had to demonstrate in the context of the application that we could complete all of the proposed activities within 1 year of the date of grant approval. So the City of Prince George, understanding those intended outcomes and criteria, we focused our application in 2 areas. One was to really advance the Select Committee's recommendation regarding the establishment and operation of a community safety hub in the downtown. And we also chose to look at incremental improvements to the current council approved package of downtown area service enhancements. So I'm just going to give you a very brief overview of what those activities in relation to those 2 focus areas were. So for the community safety hub, obviously it was to establish the hub. I'm going to give you a bit of an update about that shortly. But also in relation to safety and security, we asked for some additional police patrols. We also asked for a software application that would allow good integration between the RCMP and health services to provide really good and responsive mental health care. We also asked for some increased security for our civic facilities and parkades. In the area of cleanliness and waste management, we asked for a mini transfer station to be established that would enable our bylaw officers to continue their excellent work on cleaning up downtown. And this enabled them to have a very limited amount of time outside the downtown area, because the mini transfer station, if we're successful, is going to be established at our 18th Avenue yard. We also asked for funding to enable downtown Prince George to do biohazard inspection and cleanup, to expand the operation of days and hours that it has its downtown clean team on the street. Also, once again, additional funding for downtown Prince George to enable the Dark Alley cleanup program to be extended and also increased. And we asked for a peer-supported employment program, which was a huge theme that came from the workshop that the Select Committee had that was facilitated by Urban Matters way back in the fall of 2020. And then in the area of inclusion and support for unsheltered homeless people, we asked for funding to enable the relocation and expansion of the Native Friendship Center's storage hub. It's currently located on Quebec Street, but it's at maximum capacity every day. So we saw an opportunity to provide greater storage space for homeless individuals, and also to place a mental health worker at that site to address some of the increasing need for mental health services. And we're also proposing a comprehensive engagement with the unsheltered homeless population. As you know, as members of the Select Committee, we've tried an awful lot of things to address some of the issues particularly in the downtown core. We'd like now to talk with the people who we are most trying to support and serve. and also trying to address those impacts that we've heard about through the committee. So we want to ask the population, what's working, what's next? So in order to help put this together, I did want to acknowledge the support and participation of these organizations. We had a good participation from the city across many departments. But big thanks to Shane DeMeyer at Northern Health, Malachy Tohill at BC Housing, Jennifer Harrington from the Friendship Center, Colleen Van Moot from downtown Prince George, and of course the superintendent from the RCMP.
Okay, thanks very much, Chris. Todd, I see you on. Could you give an update? I talked a little bit about the BC Urban Mayor's Caucus and the advocacy work we're doing, and wanted to just get you to touch on the advocacy work that the Chamber is doing, particularly from the Recovery Task Force perspective.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah, you bet.
Perfect, thanks so much, and thanks Danielle at AWAC for the note there. I'm not sure how I've been on Zoom for 18 months and not figured that one out yet. So we've created a community recovery task force, which we presented to council, I believe back in January, and the mayor holds a seat on, as well as Melissa Barcelos in economic development. And so the goal of the task force is to cover a number of wide-ranging issues as they're specifically tied to how our economy returns post-COVID, but also how our community stays sustainable and has opportunity to grow beyond the pandemic. So there's been a number of action items that have come from that. Some of those are in action, and a lot of those will be presented back to that task force tomorrow at the May meeting. And it does cover, excuse me, a wide berth of opportunity. So we've got anything from looking for the adjustments to Western diversification, moving to a BC-based model, and looking at how that can be housed in Prince George, either from a head office perspective or a satellite office perspective. We're looking at opportunities for tax mitigation strategies, for reallocation of COVID grant funding processes, as well as how we work with those at risk and ensuring that they are a part of our community, but how do we work with them to provide space and opportunity. And so that would go back to some of the provincial policy pieces that we've been working on turning unused or underutilized government-owned assets into treatment and care facilities outside the Lower Mainland, because currently Chilliwack, I believe, is the closest location where people would need to go to if they're looking at recovery as a way forward. So those are a number of the pieces that we're working towards. For sure.
Okay, thanks very much, Todd. Is there one more slide? Go ahead.
In the event you didn't know, the Community Safety Hub did open in April of this year. We have lots of enthusiasm and lots of participation from a really wide range of agencies, most of whom are represented on the select committee. So I'm sure through your own staff or affiliations, you've heard about this. The committee has been working on the development of the terms of reference. It's critically important to have that terms of reference in place, because we recognize that although we have a shared vision, which you see below, a draft vision, that we all come to the Community Safety Hub with very different mandates, different perspectives, and in many instances, different governing bodies. So the terms of reference is our way to sort of set the rules of engagement, so that the intent of the Community Safety Hub, which is around service integration and coordination, can really work well. So I expect that if and when this committee convenes again, we'll be able to talk a lot more about the action plans that the collective have landed on as next steps.
All right, thanks very much. Charlotte, I'm wondering if you can give us a bylaw services update, and sorry to put you on the spot. And then we'll move down to the contracted services update that we have in place.
Sure. From our perspective, we're in the process right now. I'll just maybe people want to see me. Here I am. Okay. Right now we're in the process of hiring. So we have 4 new positions that we've created, and those should be coming on board here. I'm anticipating that the hiring process will be done late this week, early next week. So hopefully we'll have those folks on board by the middle of June. And that feeds right into the enhanced security for downtown. So looking after civic facilities as well as patrolling in the parkades. Along with that, we do have our downtown safety portion of bylaws, which are currently working mostly out of the community safety hub. So sort of having them there right in the thick of things where lots of actions taking place is very convenient for them in terms of getting back and forth to the calls for service. But it's also that sort of consistent presence within the community safety hub. Other than that, things are sort of status quo, responding to calls for service and working cooperatively with the Downtown Business Association to the extent that they're helping us out with some of the biohazard stuff as well as the graffiti. So yeah, so I think things are going along well, and as we have more people, I think we'll be able to provide more enhanced services for the downtown and for the whole city.
All right, thanks. Can you give us just an idea of what a week looks like from a call perspective? I know that they, like me, come directly to you and or through 311.
Well, we get calls in several ways, Your Worship. Sometimes they come directly down from your office or from the city manager. But the most popular ways are through 311 or through actually calling directly into the bylaw office, which a lot of people do. So I would say we're getting about, anywhere between 50 and 90 calls, 60 and 90 calls a day. Now, that's not to say that all of them are for the downtown. I would say as much as 50% would be for the downtown. Some of them are for things throughout the city. We have lots of unsightly property calls. We have lots of, construction groups that are putting mud on the road, or and animal control would be mixed in with that as well as we get some parking complaints. But we're still getting a really large number of calls for service for things downtown, including just, somebody sleeping in the doorway of my business. My needle pickup is also a really big one, although I think the needles have dropped off a bit. And I'm not exactly sure why, other than I think people are becoming more engaged in just dealing with it themselves. The biohazard partnership with Downtown Prince George has taken a bit of a weight off of us as well. And we're just starting to get into the real thick of graffiti season. But basically our guys are going from 7 in the morning right now till 7 at night. And the busiest time for the downtown is obviously first thing in the morning when they're trying to get things cleared out before businesses open.
Thanks very much, Charlotte. Before I go to you, Colleen, about the biohazard piece, Todd, you had a question about the hub.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. And I'm just curious because I know it shapes part of this grant submission that Ms. Bowen was speaking about. So on Friday, I was down there, watched the small rally that took place on George in front of the safety hub at the McLaren lot there. And a few weeks before, there was the encampment down at Millennium Park, apologies. And what I thought was really interesting about the McLaren property and the piece on Friday was that it was directly adjacent to the safety hub, which is directly adjacent and or attached to a number of the services that people are accessing: Pounds, the fire pit, needle exchange, St. Vincent's right around the corner. There's another, I believe, short-term solution right around the corner or down the alley from there too. I'm just curious, in looking at this funding being applied for, it seems like we're talking about moving things from existing locations to other parts of the city which becomes challenging for people that are accessing the services. It becomes challenging for a new migratory pattern that may create other issues, but it also doesn't bridge some of the issues of available housing necessarily in places for people. So I'm curious how that can be rolled into this.
I'm going to go to Valerie in a moment, Todd, and I'll make comment as well on the housing piece, but I talked to Malachy, and I think that Valerie has probably some messaging to bring forward via Malachy. Sorry, Valerie has messaging to bring forward from Malachy, but Chris, do you want to talk a little bit about the coordination of the hub and what it means to accessing services? And Todd brings up a good point about the sort of the flow of individuals, and we're seeing a lot of it right now, and have for quite frankly a few years, from downtown St. Vincent, the Needle Exchange, through to the Plaza, through to the Greyhound bus station, and then back, and also that is now funneling a lot of folks along 15th Avenue in front of the new student housing building, in front of the library. So Chris, if you could just comment on that.
Yeah, I'll maybe just start at the high level. Todd, you mentioned the relocation of a lot of services connected to the community safety hub. We certainly didn't apply for funding to relocate a whole lot of services. What we applied for was funding to enable the opening of the community safety hub, which was really about sort of the hard costs, facility upgrades to enable that itinerant workspace, meeting space, etc. What I can tell you is that where people move in the community is in some ways related to service provision, but it's also something that we can't always control, even through the presence of a community safety hub. So as part of the community safety hub, the Ministry of Social Development and Poverty Reduction have what they call community integration specialist workers who work right from the hub. And their job is actually to engage with people where they're at on the street, to try to connect them with existing ministry services or other supports that are offered by agencies that are resident in the hub as well. What they report is that they make an effort to connect people with services, but ultimately individuals decide if and when they wish to access services. So the presence of the community safety hub isn't actually correlated with where people are locating in community. So I just wanted to make that point really clear. And I think maybe Ms. Peters might want to comment from a bylaw perspective about where people are choosing to be in the community. I'm not an expert on that. So with that really brief comment, I'll turn it back to Mayor Hall.
Charlotte, did you have a comment about that? There you go.
I would, thanks. I would agree with Ms. Bone that ultimately individuals decide where they want to be. That lot presents it's sort of a bit of a conundrum, really, because it is located between the safety hub and a lot of the services that people do want to access. But there's a few layers to that, in that it's owned, only half of it is owned by the city, part of it is privately owned. And I don't know if that would be an appropriate place for people to go, sort of on a permanent basis. And I hesitate to say permanent, because everything we're talking about is all very temporary, leading to some of the feeding into some of the long-term strategies that there are established. I know there's a strong presence within the downtown right now. We did have the protest the other day, and people very much want to create a community or a space where people can go. I believe, though, that the thought process behind that is where people can go during the day. And I think there's arguments on both sides, whether we want to have a an area where people can congregate, or whether we want to maintain people moving around and being dispersed all over the city. And that is clearly a point for discussion on a later date.
Thanks, Charlotte. Valerie, before I go back to Todd, can you just give a bit of an overview of some of the things that you folks are doing at BC Housing with respect to the housing piece as we currently see and need it now?
Sure. Everybody, I'm sure, is aware of the project that's happening on First Avenue, and there's work going on now. And we're hoping that the modular phase of that project, which is 50 units, will be up and running before the end of the year. And then there will be the phase 2, which is the other 50 units with the health component located in that building. We're also working on the renovations to the National to get that space up and going to house more folks. We've got the project happening on 17th Avenue with Aboriginal Housing Society of Prince George, and that is well underway. We've got the Elizabeth Fry project on 15th happening. So there's a lot of projects in the works, and there will be a number of units coming online within the next year or so.
And Valerie, just a question, and it was something that Melanie and I talked about, some locations that are used by BC Housing now, but do have space, and there's some consideration being given to open those up, which could be done very quickly and would really help the current situation in the short term.
Okay, I'm not sure what he's referring to. We've got the temporary shelter on 2nd Avenue open, and that's been extended now till the end of March. So we've got that space going. We've still continued on with the capacity expansion beds in the 3 existing shelters. So there's that happening. I'm not sure if he was talking to something specific.
Yeah, I would leave it to Melanie then. So the next time we meet, he can give an update or get some information out to everybody. Thanks very much. Todd, back to you if you've got more there for this topic.
Yeah, no, thanks. And I appreciate all the varying feedback on that. I guess, the comment I would have is we've got a location. It's between services. It's abutting the safety hub, which is where a lot of additional services and manpower are located. It would seem to reason if there was a cheap way to clean up a space, cover a space, we need to find some bridge solutions here. To Valerie's point, there's a ton of stuff that's coming online, and that's great and that's encouraging, but coming online does nothing for our community right now, and particularly as we look to, I'm just looking at the graph put out by the province on the reopening plan and guidelines, and it looks like we may have visitors able to come back to our community here soon, and that would be in the summertime. And an area that abuts a safety hub and looks at a courthouse, a provincial building, I think there's some pressure that can be applied in that location.
Pressure in the sense, Todd, of moving them or leaving them?
I think if the private landowner is willing to let that land be used and it's where all the services are, I think there should be a strong discussion around how that happens.
Okay, thank you. Dan.
Just a question. Chris, Miss Bone, was talking about the city funding that is going to support the unsheltered homeless population. Do we know how many unsheltered homeless people we have in Prince George?
We don't. All we have is some metrics that we refer to often. I think I've mentioned before for this group that the Community Partners Addressing Homelessness does a point in time count. And the point in time count is just that. It's a snapshot on one night of the year as to how many homeless people there are. We've been fairly stable at the number 160, but once again, there's concern about the accuracy of that number because things change seasonally, we know. Things also change as people's living circumstances change. So we have lots of people who are couch surfing that might not appear visibly on the street as homeless. So that's our only gauge, is that point in time count. And we know for lots of reasons that's not accurate. What I can say though is that one of the benefits of the Community Safety Hub with agencies is that through conversation, we're actually getting to know more about shared clients and shared individuals. And also as the situation table comes on stream and we start to identify individuals who are at really high risk, we start to get, I think, a more comprehensive picture of who unsheltered homeless people are on the street.
It was just a question I had asked originally at the first select committee meeting as to the numbers. And the number at that time was like 50 or 60. And so no one seems to really have a handle on what we're actually dealing with. I think it would be worthwhile to know that. I'm sure not suggesting another study or anything like that, or more consultants to come up with a number, but somewhere through BC Housing and stuff, we should have a closer number than just a good guess. That's all I'd like to say.
Yeah, and we're asked quite often about what our homeless count is. We're asked about it in the dead of winter, Dan. We're asked about it in the summer. I was asked this morning by a couple folks how are homeless folks getting to Prince George, given that there's no Greyhound bus service? Why are they coming to Prince George? And I think, you know, those two questions are fairly easily answered. They're coming here because of all of the services we provide. If they're in a rural community, they come to Prince George because they can access those services. How they're getting here is through hitchhiking BC Bus North, the transit busing on Highway 16. They're getting rides with family and friends. So those are reasonably easy. And I hear your frustration about the count. As Chris points out, it's just a mark in time. And it could be on a Thursday night in December. It could be on a Monday night in July. And those will fluctuate greatly, but point well taken. And if it's something that I can talk, Valerie, to you and Malachy about, and how we can get some kind of a number that we can put some weight to, that would be great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Colleen, sorry to keep you waiting. I'm going to turn it over to you to talk a little bit about biohazard and other things that DPG are doing.
Well, thank you, Your Worship. I wasn't aware that I was going to speak today, but
well, sorry to put you on the spot. Normally, I mean, I wouldn't do that, but I know you're providing services downtown now, and I said to Chris this morning, I'll just turn it to Colleen because you're the boots on the ground.
Okay, well, I'm gonna try to put my video on because there, I think that worked. Hi, everyone. Yeah, it's been very interesting. At the start of April, downtown Prince George has been executing a graffiti removal program and as well as a biohazard removal program, along with the programs that we've been doing for a long time, which is our downtown clean team, which does litter 5 days a week. And since the fall, we've been working with DART, and they've been doing alley cleaning, mostly predominantly cleaning up needle debris. And that might be one of the contributing factors to less needle calls. But anyway, so graffiti has been interesting. Anecdotally, I have to say, I think there's definitely an increase in graffiti in downtown this time around. But I don't have any stats behind me. But we are right now in our inventory at about 30 properties with graffiti in certain areas of anything from the back alleys to the side to the doorways. And so we are working with the activators, PG Groundworks, and their crews are going out. We're at about 10 properties that we have been able to do some cover up and removal. So it's slow but sure. Weather is also a factor. And so last week was a busy week because we finally had some nice weather. And one of the things I think that some people may or may not know, but we can't just show up and paint someone's building. So we do need to get consent from property owners. And actually, we've had some very positive feedback and support and gratitude for the program so far. And then the biohazard removal, I think that Chris Bone knows that there just was definitely through the last year an increase in biohazards, and I don't really want to define those if I don't have to. I hope everybody knows what we mean. And so we are working in the C1 zone downtown because that seemed to be where a lot of the calls were coming from. And we are working with Acme Janitorial. They are out there every morning, Monday to Saturday, trying to look for and clean up in the fronts of our downtown businesses. That is the first priority for us in the mornings. And then we are responding to calls for service when we are learning about a situation that a property owner would like cleaned up. And so those are coming in not on a daily basis, but certainly 4 or 5 times a week we are hearing about those situations. And but we are trying to get to them quickly, and we are again experiencing some frustration, but then gratitude that the program is there to deal with the unpleasant scenario that most people don't really want to have to deal with. So it's moving along, and it's been a learning experience. It's the city. Thank you for helping us learn a lot about even the software program and those kinds of things. So we've had a lot of great support, and I think we're getting into a bit of a groove that shows that we can be responsive and that we can deal with, unfortunately, the symptoms of some of the lack of cleanliness that's in downtown.
Thanks very much, Colleen. And maybe what I'll do is, from a biohazard perspective, from a graffiti perspective, there's also the piece around, and maybe Chris or Ian around, I love putting people on the spot today, the piece around garbage pickup that we do early in the mornings. There's a piece on street and sidewalk work. So that's all carrying on as well from that enhancement piece that we supported quite some time ago. I don't see anybody else's hand up, but I want to touch on a couple of things that have been brought up. But I do want to say thanks to Councillor Scott who's with us today. So thank you, Councillor Scott, for being here. And it was alluded to, Todd, when you talked about the location between the hub and the lawyer's office on George. And we're seeing a tremendous amount of tent cities that have sprung up in various locations throughout the province. And the ones, I guess, that are most notable are the ones that you see on the news, which is Beacon Hill Park, Oppenheimer Park, Strathcona Park, and the subsequent work that took place and the work that's going to continue to take place to bring those parks back to some life. And I think that the BC housing piece is so important to us when it comes to providing shelter or other accommodation to homeless folks, whether it be on a nightly basis or weekly, whatever that looks like. And that's why we've really tied ourselves to BC Housing and Valerie and Malachy to help us out with that. Now we're seeing the tent cities come up. We know what's happened in other communities, and it's been very difficult. It's been difficult to deal with from a city perspective, from a bylaw perspective, our CMP perspective. And I had a conversation with Kyle and Todd, I guess about a week ago. And my preference around looking at these tent cities is the fact that for me, it's housing first, but housing first with services. There needs to be services applied. And when you talk about services, I've gone over it 100 times. I've talked about the integrated health model, and thanks, Valerie, for bringing that up. I tell you what, it's a real bonus to see some work being done over there, and at least we've now got a timeline, particularly on the first 50 modular units. We're hearing loud and clear from other municipalities around tent cities and the issues around security, safety, those kinds of things. So I think what's going to happen, and I suppose I'm going to put some others on the spot that are in this room and on Zoom, but it's going to boil down to a conversation with council, going to boil down to a conversation and some movement and discussion around what we're going to do about 10 cities with bylaw services, the RCMP. And I want to turn to Walt. I don't see, there's Walt. Did you want to comment, Walt, on sort of the staff piece of where we're headed with some of this, particularly around tent cities?
Certainly, Your Worship. Thank you very much for the opportunity. As you've stated, there's been several other cities that have permitted these permanent encampments or tent cities. And our staff have been in constant contact and discussions with these cities. And we need to take advantage of the experience, knowledge, and learnings of all these other cities who have permitted permanent encampments and are now, for the most part, as you've indicated, Mayor Hall, dismantling them for several reasons. I'm by no means an expert. I'm just listening to what other experts are saying. That I wouldn't think administration believes that that's a best practice currently, is to permit that. But as you say, it is a decision of council, and so administration intends on bringing forward some reports to council in the near future here with some options for council to decide ultimately what's the will of the community with respect to that issue, as well as some other options that we'll be bringing forward with some tools to assist bylaw enforcement officers, to assist other staff for some more clear direction perhaps as to how to address the issue of homelessness and the vulnerable people downtown. So we'll be bringing that to council for further discussion to see where council would like to go specifically on whether there's a need for tools to deal with any obstructing of sidewalks or graffiti or overt drug use, for example, or disposal of needles, things that aren't set out in plain language right now in any bylaws, to see if there's an interest in bringing that forward. But as has been stated during this meeting, that needs to be done in conjunction with the establishment or some direction of some locations where people may congregate during the daytime, rather than just having them move from one place to another place. That's the administration's view, Your Worship, and so we intend to bring that forward to council for further discussion.
Yeah, thanks very much, Walter. And I know that it's a pretty tight time frame that you'll be doing that within. There's no question, and I go back to what Dan asked about the number of homeless folks in Prince George, and there's no question that, we're entering into a different phase. We're seeing different things happening, not just in downtown. And I'm going to go to Sean in a minute just to sort of elaborate, Superintendent, on what's happening in other neighborhoods. I drive through the Gateway almost once a day on my way to or from home or to work, and the impacts there, seeing graffiti in side streets and on fences. We're seeing a multitude of people who have set up tents in that piece of property that we've been referring to, and we're seeing it elsewhere. And you can drive by many locations within spitting distance, if you will, from downtown, and you'll see small encampments in behind a grove of trees bordering our recreation facilities, particularly over off of Strathcona and around Child Development Center, the ball field. So this is a new phase for us. And am I surprised about it? Somewhat, but should have known that at some point we would be looking at the creation of tent cities within our city. So if I could, Sean, then I'll go up to Dan.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with what the mayor just said there. So and I don't think it's a shock to anybody, but it is a pervasive issue. And we think of it as a downtown issue, but that's just because that's where the concentration is. But certainly we respond to calls for service into the gateway area as well quite extensively, but really all corners of the city, up in the heart. And I mean, we must have a pretty good transit system, because it makes you wonder how some of these people get from the services to some of these far-reaching locations that we do find them. But yeah, as they disperse further out, really they're a little more out of mind. So I think this issue's come to a head over the last couple of years, as I just think there's a bit more of a concentration and a bit more of an inclination for these persons to not be as easily displaced, and to and perhaps rightfully so, with destigmatization, with their situation, are kind of taking ownership and saying, hey, we're here. So I think the numbers are going up a little bit, but I think it's just kind of bubbling to the surface of what's been there for some time.
Thanks, Superintendent. Dan.
Yeah, I'd just like to go back to Walter's comments. Did Walter say that they would be recommending to council that perhaps there could be a congregation designated spot? Is that what I heard, or?
So, Your Worship, we're going to be bringing options to council for council to ultimately choose what, based on the best administrative advice that we can give council from other communities' experiences, learnings of other communities. And ultimately, it's council's decision as to what measures we will be implementing. But one of those options might be to designate locations for people to congregate during the daytime, in conjunction with a bylaw that specifically precludes littering, obstructing sidewalks, graffiti, no overt drug use, just no disposal of needles and drug paraphernalia, things like that. But we definitely want to take a balanced approach. We recognize, as has been stated, that the long-term solution is not enforcement, but supportive housing and integrated housing with those necessary support services for the vulnerable people. But that's a long-winded answer to your question.
Yeah, when you said that other cities are dismantling their permanent encampments or whatever you referred to, is that because of safety and crime issues, or what was the reasoning?
In short, yes, that's part of the answer. But I'm not the best person in the room, I don't think, to explain that rationale. I don't know if there's anybody that could help me out from staff that could expand on that's been in contact with these, or perhaps Superintendent Wright.
Well, I'll weigh in, and then I'll go to Charlotte and the superintendent. And I think you're absolutely right, Dan. It really is from a crime and safety perspective, and the safety of the people that are in those 10 cities. And in some of the communities, they're seeing a proliferation of drug sales and use within the 10 cities. So it's yeah, you're absolutely right about that.
Okay.
Superintendent. Oh, sorry, Dan.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Superintendent, and then I'll go up to Charlotte. Over to Charlotte.
Yeah, absolutely. From the communications I've had with my peers in policing agencies in those jurisdictions, that is a concern once you have an entrenched an established city of tents or temporary structures. It gets to be quite problematic for police. And besides there being fire and health and safety issues, there's a fair bit of crime which occurs, including violent crime. So really having those fully entrenched and established kind of developments is problematic. And my understanding from a policing perspective, that's why there's been support for removing them.
Okay.
Thanks, Superintendent. Charlotte.
I agree. I think criminality is a big factor in why these encampments are being dismantled at the moment in other locations. I also tend to believe that I think we're a little bit behind some of these other locations, and perhaps the other side to this is the criminality is perhaps only a portion of it, but the other half may be the fact that some of the communities are a little bit ahead of us in developing their supportive housing plans. Now, that's not to say that we're behind for any reason other than I don't think we were touched by this problem as early as some of the other communities were. The other thing that I think we need to really remember is that supportive housing is going to be tremendous, but we still have to be alive to the fact that these folks will not be in that supportive housing 24 hours a day. People have freedom of movement, and I think there needs to be some sort of place for people to go during the day where they feel a sense of community and a sense where they can be and where they can be able to exist in their social circles, which is not going to be a place where they continue to be moved. And I think that is sort of the crux of what was being said at the small protest that took place here last week.
Thanks, Charlotte. Go to Chris and then over to Owen.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment. Certainly the visibility of unsheltered homeless people is very concerning for all of us involved in this select committee. But I'm also under the impression that COVID-19 has really exacerbated the presence of individuals on the street, because many of the services that provided an opportunity for people to come inside, to meet, to congregate, to socialize, to eat, have been closed for an extended period of time. And our hope, of course, once again, will it completely eliminate some of the concerns you're addressing today? No. But our hope is that once some of the COVID-19 health restrictions lift, that many of the service providers will once again be in a position to open their doors and welcome people into their agencies, particularly during the daytime hours. So I just wanted to float that. I also wanted to just say a little shout out to our relationship with BC Housing. I would say we're very much in line, if not ahead, of some of our communities in the province in terms of the provision of supported housing. I think, like every community in the province, the population that we're really struggling with are individuals, for whatever reason, who can't exist in our supported housing system as it currently exists. They really need no barrier kinds of housing. And I think we've taken a giant step in that direction with the First Avenue, where people who have addiction issues will have the opportunity to be properly supported on that site. It will not solve all of the issues, but it's a step in the right direction. And I think the City of Prince George, working with Northern Health and BC Housing, really led the way on that development. So I wanted to make sure that I mentioned that.
Yeah, and before I go to Owen, we have a question around washroom from Paul that I'll get to, but I just wanted to make a comment about First Avenue as well. And I think really it is, at the end of the day, a model that we have two other locations like that in the province, but it very much is a model of partnership and very much a model of, I think, services. And the peer communities that I continue to compare ourselves to are places like Kelowna, Vernon, Kamloops, Nanaimo. And what happens in those communities, I can tell you, is virtually what's happening in our community. And in many ways, we're leading and doing a great job on the housing front. And to measure the housing piece is relatively easy, and it boils down to units, and it boils down to the services you're providing. What becomes the difficulty in comparison is the services that are provided and the people that are needing those services, and I reflect back to Dan's question. But when we talk about services from community to community. It all is really based on need. And in many respects, there's a lot of triaging going and taking place on the streets for professionals that are dealing with folks that are in dire need of healthcare, those services with mental illness or drug addiction. So with that, I'll go up to Owen, and then I'll deal with the question around washrooms.
Thanks, Your Worship. So just in regard to the comments regarding the idea of a place to be during the day and tent cities, like the tent city thing, I'm personally really torn on it. You know, I've said this a few times now. I think it's a terrible idea, but you know, it might be better than what exists right now. And I agree, yeah, it can be a hotbed for crime inside those places. But just around the idea about not necessarily a tent city, but just a place where everyone's allowed to congregate during the daytimes at least. I think there might be something there really, but what we're looking at is a short-term solution and to a problem that probably won't be going away when the whole First Avenue project has gone. Obviously, we anticipate that things will get better as some of these housing projects come to fruition. So I would like to kind of put it out there again. I probably said this years ago at the beginning of that planning stages for that housing project, is designing a more permanent place to congregate during the daytime for people on the street, because even when that's done, there's still going to be people on the street hanging out, and it was something that was a little more appropriate and frankly a little more dignified to hang out than on the sidewalk or in somebody's doorstep, and somewhere that they're going to be allowed to be something that's open enough that if something bad's going down, that they might be able to be seen and caught and close to those services that might be provided at that location. So I would just like to kind of put some support behind that.
Okay, thanks very much, Owen. I'm going to turn to Chris. Paul had a question around the washrooms that we had at the Civic Plaza and what's happening on that front.
So washroom access, that's a really tough conversation. So with the two homeless storage service sites that City of Prince George contributes financially to, one of the intents of that was to provide improved washroom access. We also know that you could have a washroom on every corner of the street. And some of the issues that we speak of in relation to biohazards would not be eliminated. So we tried the pilot project in the Civic Plaza with the public bathrooms. It was a funded project, so when the funding ended, we withdrew the pilot. There were some positives of that, but there were also some issues with that, in that when you have monitored public washroom sites, it often contributes to the congregation of people. And I know that was a concern on several fronts. Maybe the superintendent might be able to speak more to those concerns. So I don't know that in the short term, we'll be resurrecting the Civic Plaza bathrooms. We also know, though, that bathroom access is more than just making a toilet and a wash basin available. Experience with all of the cities across the country, and certainly throughout the province, when we're trying to provide at-risk individuals with bathroom access, the experience has been that access has to be monitored 24/7 to ensure the health and safety of everybody using the washer. So that subject will likely be one of the issues that the Community Safety Hub partnership tackles, in how can we provide washroom access in a safe way, and also through engagement with the homeless population to try to find out what's not working with the current sites that are available for washroom access. And so it's a really tough conversation, Paul. There's not an easy solution, but in short, we're not looking at the Canada Game Plaza bathroom reopening in the short term, at least.
Good, thanks, Chris. Paul, any other anything else?
No, just thank you for that response. And just a couple things I would say is I can confirm that the disappearance or the locking of that washroom hasn't necessarily put an end to the congregating in the Canada Games Plaza. And then just to sort of support what you said about the need for constant monitoring, I mean, that's one of the issues that we're dealing with. We feel like that our public washrooms at the public library are, you know, in heavy use because of the lack of other options in town. And it has been a real strain the last few months on our staff complement in terms of maintaining, you know, the safety around the washrooms and you know, knowing what's going on there when there's problematic behavior. So, you know, it's a real pressure point for us at the library. And yeah, I can just confirm that that's true. You do need that constant monitoring.
Thanks, Paul. We've got a question from Lynn, and it's around the hostile environment barriers on the City of PG garden boxes in the gateway and in front of North 54. And I'm going to go to Paul. Sorry, I'm going to go to Dan because he's from the gateway, and I don't know if we've. Yeah, I did get the email, and I'll comment as well. So Dan, over to you.
Yeah, I was contacted obviously by all the media trying to, you know, I don't know. I mean, the idea of calling something like that hostile architecture is just absolutely ridiculous. I mean, I'm very clear. I said it. We did it as a deterrent for people sleeping on top of our bedding plants, and in our case, those flower beds are on private property, and the merchants of the gateway pay to have flowers put into them, and people sleep on top of it. So it's basically a deterrent. Yes. You know, I mean, I don't know. I was just kind of upset about the fact that it was used, the word hostile. I mean, we have all sorts of, in our gateway, as you guys know, the city developed a beautiful Ron Brent Park up there with picnic tables and benches, and we still have benches available at a number of the corners. So as far as a place for people to sit or rest, there's still adequate spots in the gateway. So I didn't make a big issue about it. I just said, tough luck. Sorry, I didn't say that, but I just mean it was something that all the directors and stuff totally supported, that we did go ahead with it. And I don't know if any of you followed any of the comments that came back through PG Matters and some of these different things, but everybody seemed to support the gateway in terms of taking care of their own property and their own investment.
Thanks very much, Dan. And I can't speak specifically to North 54, but staff are taking a look at it. We got the email, a couple of weeks ago, I think, if somebody can, Ian, was it a couple of weeks ago? Staff are looking at it. And it was the first that I heard something like that referenced as hostile. So obviously we'll look at it. But that's kind of the update from our perspective. Lynn, over to you if you had anything else.
No, I think that the reason it came to my attention is I was approached by a reporter to comment on the hostile architecture that was put up at the gateway. So instead of going to the media and giving my opinion, I did talk to you, Mayor Lynn Hall, to ask how it came about, what is the process, and the purpose. I understand the purpose is to stop people from sitting there, but also the benches have been removed for actual sitting on. So on a, personal note, my daughter was waiting for an appointment at a Victoria Medical Building, and she had an hour to wait because she took transit and then her appointment was delayed. So she was looking for somewhere to be. And she doesn't live downtown. She was feeling a bit nervous about being in the area by herself, but there was one bench that she could find downtown to sit down. And besides a bus stop where it's also with the divisions in the bench. And so when asked about it from being on this committee, my viewpoint of it, that's why I wanted to get the background about what that was looked like. I understand from a business perspective that it's challenging to have people sitting on your garden boxes and laying on the flowers. Yeah, you want to protect what you have invested in. I get that. But it is, hostile is a strong word to me, but it is a negative approach. And I'm concerned of what it is for people, but also I am concerned for you, for your businesses in the gateway. I get it, but it also is non-inclusive. And so I don't know the answer to it. I just was curious about the outcome and what to do. Maybe to hang baskets of flowers rather than putting them in boxes like that might be something to look at. But of course, I'm not one to criticize without maybe helping problem solve and come up with ideas. But because I was approached about it and because they were concerned about what it was like for people who don't have a place to rest or to sit. Of course, you need security to move them on if things are happening that are negative, but I just wondered about the outcome.
Yeah, I won't go on. Thank you for your comments. I'll pass those on as well to the directors. But one thing I was just going to comment, if you look at downtown, everybody's putting big fences in front of their buildings. All the doorways got big steel bars and stuff on. Businesses downtown got bars on every window. Is that hostile architecture, or is that people taking care of their property? There's gates and fences everywhere. Everybody is boarding, locking, whatever they can do to protect what their investment is. So anyway, thank you for your comments. I'll pass them on.
Go to John. Thank you very much, Dan. Thanks, Lynn. Go to John and then over to Owen. John, before I go to Owen, let me respond. Let me clarify a couple things. When I speak about the 4 pillars, it's not the 4 pillars of this committee. It's the 4 pillars of the BC Urban Mayors Caucus with 13 of us. So I want to make the differentiation. One of those pillars is around housing. So I was asked earlier in this meeting to provide input and an update on the advocacy work that that particular group is doing. So that's where the 4 pillars came from. It's not from this select committee. So I want to make that clear. Right. So, okay, I just wanted to make sure that there was a differentiation there. If I could get you to send that 4 pillars plan, I'm vaguely familiar with it from back east. Could you send that to us so that we could distribute it to the community, or sorry, to the committee? If you could send that to Maureen, I'm sure you have her email address. That's how she communicates with everyone. And I want to talk about advocacy for a moment. And I do talk a lot about Prince George's being the hub city, being the northern capital. And all of the groups that are represented here today, part of the biggest conversation we've had is around advocacy. Talked to Todd many times at the chamber about advocacy and the work that they're doing on the provincial and federal level at really for any issue. But let's just speak to this one, because this is what the committee is established for. The advocacy work is so important to provide the things that you're talking about, John. We advocate to the feds and the province for funding as a hub city to be able to provide those services, whether that dollar goes to the health authority, whether that dollar goes to social service agencies, whether that dollar goes to transportation. Those dollars are advocated on behalf of municipalities and nonprofit organizations, Chamber of Commerce, to facilitate the opportunity for us to provide services, and they're funded services. I agree with you. We hear loud and clear about the need for a women's center, women and children's center. So you see Elizabeth Fry stepping up. You see the First Nations community stepping up with the housing and services at 17th and Massey. All of that is the advocacy work that we're all responsible for doing. And I would say that we've done a pretty good job. Is there more to do? There's no question there's more to do. I think if you were to talk to superintendent, he'd like way more dollars on the policing side for various things that they're doing. Nonprofit organizations that are providing healthcare services to the marginalized folks, they would love more funding. Northern Health would love more funding. I think for me, it's 2 things. It's about the recognition that we are a hub city. Secondly, the recognition has to be able to provide those services to everyone that you've talked about. We talk about youth and their needs, and whether or not we have the services to provide to our youth in the community, women and children, those kinds of things, John. But I get where you're coming from. But I think my point is we all have that responsibility to advocate. Owen, and that's the last one. We can continue, but Owen, you're on the list.
Thank you very much. And thanks, John, for a lot of those comments as well. I could elaborate on a lot of that too, but I won't for the sake of time here. But except for the one point is I know at behind Natsio's we have a cardboard dumpster that normally has a slot for the, you put the cardboard in. We recently had the company BBRD come and take it away, weld the plate over that so people can't reach in and take the cardboard out of there and start fires in the alley, which we had Natsio's has been almost burned down twice this spring because of fires in the middle of the night, and not for warmth. You can tell by the videos that they're just people on drugs. But that's not the comment I wanted to refer to. One was kind of more towards possibly Graham and Northern Health, and actually the what's coming on in throughout the north is supposed to be a lot greater internet connectivity in a lot of small communities throughout the entire north. I think there's a massive infrastructure project that's due to be completed this fall, and what kind of benefits we might see from a healthcare perspective, and offering those smaller communities where we know that we have people come in from and often end up on the street, and what sort of services they'll be able to be provided by the internet, and what sort of plans the Northern Health has. And obviously some things have to be face to face, but if there's any comments, or maybe, and I ask you to come back to the next meeting with some information.
You're muted, Graham.
Usually spacebar unmutes me. Thanks, Owen. No, there certainly are, there's recognition that certainly being that we're the city with the services, we do get a lot of folks that travel from a lot of feeder communities to access our OAT treatment. So for so OAT being the opioid agonist therapy treatment, and other sort of tertiary-based treatment facilities. So we do have some treatment in Prince George, certainly not residential treatment programs, but the problem with that arrangement is that people have to travel, and we're a Four Seasons community, obviously, and so there is some discussions that I'm actually not involved in, but my director is, around establishing a virtual access to virtual care for a lot of these communities. I mean, these communities struggle even with clients who are detoxing from any substance. So there is some discussions that are underway. Because there's certainly, I mean, with better IT access, that infrastructure would certainly help with the virtual format supports, which we already are doing for psychiatry services. So certainly we'll see some benefits there. Really what it comes down to is getting more established processes in place so communities know how to support our end. We have the experts here, and those experts rely on infrastructure at the other end to support those conversations so they can provide adequate supports in that telehealth format. So yeah, I mean, that's certainly to that specific piece there, that's a definite opportunity. We also, I'll just take a little bit of time. Are we ready till 2:30, Your Worship?
Yeah, you're fine, Graham, go ahead.
We have recently completed renovations for an expansion of our existing programs down on 3rd and George there. So we're actually underway and doing our program development work. We have the pleasure of hosting someone who's currently doing her fellowship and who has experience in setting up IOT programs in other cities. And so she's helping us with setting up our sort of policy framework and how to do it, planning processes so we can establish our own IOT program here in Prince George. And we anticipate that that's going to just provide a real missing service that the North has not had, and so we'll be unique in that regard in the North. There are not other programs presently planned for other places, so that virtual aspect is going to be certainly important. And the last thing I wanted to mention was we are in conversation. Colleen's aware of this as well. We've been discussing this with Colleen as well with Downtown PG. We're working with the Fire Pit and Pounds program to develop sort of a peer-led, peer-funded cleaning team or service downtown. It's still in its early stages of development and how we want to sort of action that, but there is some desire to support some of the activities, the outside activities that happen downtown, such as the farmers market and other sort of outdoor venue activities, and getting folks, individuals who are underhoused, involved in supporting cleaning up the area, certainly on a targeted basis, and perhaps in a more expanded capacity once we get our feet underneath us in this plan. So we have a bit of funding for Northern Health to support some of that, and as do those other organizations that I mentioned. So we're in the early stages of conversations as a sort of tri-party. We inhabit that corner to develop some, hopefully will be something that we can carry forward if we can demonstrate success with this as the summer months ensue. So those are some big plans that we have on the way right now, and we're quite excited. For the expanded space, once we get things tucked away, we're going to be having an open house. We want to invite our neighbors and anybody that's interested just to walk you through and to just show off the space a bit and just to explain a little bit what we expect is going to happen out of there. So we'll stay tuned for that.
Marianne, thank you very much. We've got a couple of minutes. I want to go to Lynn for the final comment, and then I've got a couple of comments I'll make at the end here.
For me, for a comment for me?
Yeah, I saw you had a question, Lynn, didn't you? Or am
No, not me.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much. Just a comment. Okay, thanks. All right. Well, thanks, everyone. I hope everybody felt they had an opportunity to at least speak and give an opinion on things today. John, if you would send that information to Maureen, we'll get it out to the committee. I'd like us to get back together in about 3 or 4 weeks. We've got some work that's taking place now. We'll see what transpires. If you have any questions of the city with respect to what we're doing and things that are happening within our organization specific to this social issues that we're dealing with, get a hold of me. You've all got my email address, and I can get them to the appropriate departments for a follow-up. And I think that's probably the easiest way to get this moved through. So if you send it to myself or to Esther, my executive assistant, that will work out perfectly, and we'll get it distributed out. So thank you very much, everybody. I greatly appreciate your participation. And as I said, we'll get a notice out in 3 to 4 weeks to get together once again. Thank you very much, everybody.
Goodbye. Thank you.